Welcome back. This is part two of the Campus Visit video series. I'm Dr. Claire Forsty, staff member at the Center for Educational Innovation at the University of Minnesota. Now, in the last video, I talked about what the campus visit is and how to prepare for it. In this video, it's time to dig into job talks and teaching demos. I'll also share some thoughts about some of the thorny questions related to how we present ourselves on campus visits. Thinking about job talks and teaching demos, the main takeaway here is that you should practice, practice, practice. Take as many opportunities as you can to practice your job talk and practice your teaching demo. In the academic interview video, I talked about behaving like a professor. So that's another bit of advice is to project yourself as a professor. You can hear some details about that in that video series. So please feel free to check those out. Now, for job talks, or sometimes called research talks, some questions to ask are who's going to be in the room? Will it be the search committee, colleagues from other departments, or other academic leaders across the institution, students? Who will be in that space? How much time will you have? Job talks are typically maybe 45 minutes of presentation with some time for Q&A at the end. And then what are the norms in your discipline for job talks? It can be really helpful to be talking with and observing colleagues' job talks. I'll say that again to get a sense of what those norms are and what you should expect to do. And here are some job talk practices you might consider implementing. So, first, you really want to have no more than three clear takeaways from your research. Your goal is not to pack in as much information as possible, it's to leave the folks attending your job talk with a sense of what your argument is. Keep it simple and keep it clear. Stick to your time. This is not the time to go over. Hopefully, practicing will give you some experience with that. You want to be brief and focused, and now is also not the time to ramble. And what about the Q&A period, the question and answer period that comes at the end? If you've had the opportunity to present at an academic conference, those are really good opportunities to practice with a Q&A. You can acknowledge folks' questions, you can connect them to future work. The key here is to not get defensive and not to overpromise what your work is going to be. You also want to be listening for underlying departmental tensions or colleagues who you think might be difficult. You can tell from the Q&A quite a bit about how your colleagues interact with each other and how they respect job candidates. Similarly, for teaching demonstrations, here are some questions to think about. Also, like your job talks, who's going to be in the room? Will there be students in the room? Will they be assessing your teaching in some way? Will it be your faculty, potential future colleagues pretending to be students, which can be a little awkward? So find out who's going to be in the room as you're teaching. Do you have a choice of what you're teaching? Will you be guest lecturing for someone's class and will they choose the topic for you? Or do you have free reign to decide what you're teaching? Here, too, how much time will you have? Are you teaching a full class? Is that a full hour, hour and a half, something else? And then what are the norms in your discipline related to teaching and for the institution? For example, if you are giving a teaching demonstration at a teaching focused institution, a straight up lecture for an hour is not going to fly. You are going to need to include probably some active learning or at least pauses for questions and conversation along the way. Here are some practices to have in mind for your teaching demonstration. So, like with a job talk or a research talk, have 1 to 2 key concepts or aims, objectives, just a couple of things that you want students to be able to do by the end of your class session. Use backwards design principles. And if you're not sure what that is, fortunately, we have a teaching center here at the University of Minnesota that can help you with that. You want to engage in some active learning and be aware of some basic teaching lingo. So, like the concept of backwards design that I talked about a minute ago, you want to know what active learning is. You might want to learn a couple of other concepts like Bloom's taxonomy can be helpful to know. You can ask for feedback from students in your class session like you would if you were teaching any other class. How are you going to know that your students are getting the concepts that you're teaching? Now, if your teaching demonstration is virtual, if your campus visit is virtual, you absolutely can use active learning there too. You want to use the tools that are available to you, but not make it so overly complicated that you're uncertain about what you're doing, even with practice. So keep it simple. Okay, I know that's a lot, so I just want to give you a minute to take a breath, to breathe. There are lots of breathing gifts out there you can find to remind you to breathe. So take a minute, take a breath. Hopefully, you've breathed a time or two. And what I want to do now is give you a little bit of time to get yourself ready to deliver a really good job talk and a really good teaching demonstration. So, what I'll ask you to do is when I'm done with this slide, just pause for a few minutes and identify in your notes what three key takeaways from your current research would be for an audience that's internal to your field. So think about how you speak to people who are internal to your field. What would be the three key takeaways about your research? Then jot down three key takeaways for a cross disciplinary audience. For some job talks, you'll have participants from other disciplines and you're speaking to them too. They're also assessing you. So, what would your three key takeaways be for a cross disciplinary audience? And then take a moment to jot down three key takeaways for undergraduate students, just as an example. What are the three key ideas if you had to teach your research that you would share with undergraduate students? Now, imagine that you've been asked to teach your research and that you're teaching about your research to an undergraduate class of non majors. So these are students who may not have much awareness about your field at all. And that really matters for how you plan your class session. So, again, take a minute here and jot down one thing you'd want students to be able to know or do by the end of your class. So, take a minute to do that first, and then write down what you would do in your class to get them there. So, imagining this undergraduate class of non majors, what's the thing that you would want them to know or the thing you would want them to be able to do at the end of the class you're teaching? And what are you going to do to get them there? There's a resource that's linked in the slides associated with this video series about the one sentence lesson plan that gets at this idea of developing your objective for the class and then planning out what you're going to do following that. It's a really handy resource for class planning in general. And hopefully, as you're working on what you'll do to get students to that objective, you incorporate some active learning along the way. And what about those awkward in between times when you're moving from one space to another, you have a little break or a pause? There's no reason why you can't be practicing small talk skills now, even before you have an interview. As the pandemic has proceeded, I found that my small talk skills have gotten a little rusty. So if you have opportunities to practice them, now's the time. At grocery stores or at daycare pickups, chatting with other parents, maybe before a meeting starts. So practice those skills so you feel prepared to do that small talk, even if you don't like it during your campus visit. You want to be what I think of as a knowledgeable stranger about the context that you could be living in. So you can ask your colleagues about their experience. What's your experience living in this community or living nearby? You can share that you've done a little bit of research on the community and it sounds like these are the aspects, important aspects of living here. Is that right? You can say either I'm not from here, so help me understand what this context is like, or maybe I am, and this is what I remember from when I was a kid, or how things have changed. So You can ask curious questions, and it helps to have done a little bit of research about the community that the institution is embedded in. And in general, you want to be your authentic self, but your projected professor self. And I have talked about that endlessly in this series. So please check that out if you're not sure what that means. In terms of following up after the campus visit, hopefully you've been really good about taking notes throughout all of your interviews. Hopefully that's something that you were prepared to do. So it is a good idea to send brief follow up emails to the key people that you interviewed with throughout the day. And again, just like with first round interviews and even second round interviews before campus visits, it can take quite a while for academic search processes to wrap up. So hopefully you got a clear sense of the timeline from the search committee. And if you haven't heard back within a few weeks or a month after what that deadline might be, it's totally fine to send a short check in email, but not too much. Don't send too many emails, and typically, search chairs don't want a phone call. So a short email to check in is usually fine after a couple few weeks. One of the things I thought a lot about when I was on the academic job market are was this question of how do I balance being authentically who I am and being professional? How do I decide what line to walk? And a few questions that really helped me think this through are to spend some time thinking about in your role as a future professor, what are your values and how do you show who you are on the one hand? And then on the other hand, in your field, what does it mean to be a professional professor? Do those two questions align? Do they diverge? What does it mean to align your values with what it means to be a professor in your field? And you get to decide what line you walk. You get to decide how much of your authentic self fits within the professional norms of your discipline and how much you're okay being outside of those norms, maybe a little bit or maybe a lot. But I like this framing as what feels authentic to you? What are the expectations in your field? Where do those two ideas align and where do they diverge? Sometimes writing it out or mapping it out in that way gives you a sense of what kinds of concessions are okay and what kinds of things are not okay. A second set of tough questions to think about is how do you balance speaking with authority, but not be overly arrogant in what you know? So keep in mind, you know a lot about your research. And maybe if you've been teaching, you know about your teaching as well. You can speak with confidence from your experience, and you are the expert in your research, right? You've been conducting it for years potentially. You know a lot about that particular context and your experience. However, you know only a little bit about this new institution, no matter how much research you've done. There's a lot to learn, and you only know a little bit about your new colleagues. So, you want to be approaching your new colleagues and your institutions with some curiosity. You want to be mindful of assumptions you might be making about an institution, and you want to be unpacking that rather than making claims that you know already everything there is to know about this type of institution. And here, like with the previous set of questions, you get to decide how you walk that line. I'm including this slide from the academic interview presentation here again because it's really, really important. And so I just want to remind you that your perspective on your fit with your prospective institution, that also really matters. So as a reminder, think about whether the position fits you or maybe fits you for the short term or the long term. And again, do you see scholars like you and a diversity of scholars in the department and in the institution? Pay attention to the kinds of lives your colleagues have. How do they seem? What's your gut instinct there? Do they seem like they're engaged in the community? Are they engaged in their families' lives? Are they having maybe a little bit of fun? What's the departmental culture? Are you sensing any conflicts among the faculty as you're there? How do your colleagues feel about the administration? Are there initiatives they like or don't like? Ask them about that. What do you know about the geographic context and the community? Is that a place you could live in the short term or the long term? And lastly, how much of a fit do you need to survive and be successful? It can be really helpful to spend a little bit of time thinking about whether a position is going to be a good fit for you or not in advance of your campus visit. So I'd advise you to take a couple of minutes and pause this presentation, and in your notes, write down how you'll know that a position is a good fit for you. Maybe two or three signals that you think you might get to know if a position is a good fit or not. And then what are two must haves or deal breakers, things that if they did or didn't exist within this position would be make it really clear whether it's a position you could take or not. These are great questions to ask again before you head to a campus visit. And there are a few other considerations that I want to share. So, one way that the academic job market advantages folks with resources is that there are some hidden costs that they don't tell you about in advance. So, for example, there's the cost of having professional clothing and access to food. So, there are often support resources that you can find that might help you purchase clothing that fits you. And again, with food, having a few things, snacks to take along the way. If that is a cost consideration for you, seek some support. There also are bigger costs to consider, like travel costs. So, some institutions ask you to pay for your travel costs upfront and then reimburse you afterwards. So those are some things to think about if costs are tight for you. A couple other things to be aware of. I advise folks not to share too widely on social media when you're going for a campus visit, or if you have gotten a job but it's not official yet. I know you might want to be enthusiastic and sharing that information with your networks, but be mindful of how you celebrate that information because there may be folks in your network who also have applied for that job or who know folks who have. So just be aware of that and think carefully before you share on social media. And I feel like I need to say this out loud that no job offer, if you were on the job market for a year or 2 years or 3 years, that is not failure. The job market is incredibly tight and competitive and not a meritocracy. There are lots of dynamics at play that we have no control over. So it's always good to have in mind plans B and C and talk with colleagues about what their plans were and other paths that they've taken along the way. Just a little side note, if you recall a statistic that I shared in the academic interviewing videos about the number of institutions that are focused on research versus teaching, the vast majority of higher ed institutions are focused in some way on teaching. So if you want to develop your teaching a little bit, we have some great programs at the U. There's a graduate course, Grad 8101, in the Preparing Future Faculty program that's all about teaching in higher education. I teach that course and my colleagues do as well. There's also the Teaching Assistant and Postdoc Professional Development Program, in which you attend a series of workshops and complete a capstone project as part of that. These can be good programs to include on your CV as a way to signal your expertise and knowledge in teaching. All right, just wanted to send you a little encouragement. This is an image that says encouragement, and it's a little mint leaf that's saying you can do it and you've got this. So I am sending you good hopes and wishes and dreams for success on the job market. Take care, everyone.